And hello, we are live from Hollywood with the fifth annual Hollywood Kitchen Oscar special or Oscar cook along. So, thank you guys so much. The first one ran 4.5 straight hours. Danny and Laura were there, and that was during lockdown when the world was it's the world's insane still now. But anyway, that was during lockdown, and we literally had nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. Today, it's going to be a little bit tighter of a show. We're just going to do about an hour. But it's going to be action-packed with a lot of wonderful recipes, stories, and fun. So I'd like to welcome, of course, my friend and frequent collaborator, Mary Stanford.
Hello, everybody.
Danny Miller.
Hi, all.
Our resident cocktail expert, Liz Locke.
Hello.
And Lara Gabriel. So welcome you guys again to Hollywood Kitchen.
Thanks, Carrie. It's thrilled to be
Thanks
back.
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We have a theme. The first year was nominees and winners. The second year was they didn't win, they should have, and that completely stinks. A third year, oh God, my memory is bad. I can't remember. And then last year we did foodies and lifestyle gurus. So I've tried to kind of come up with a theme every year to make them a little different. And this year is the theme. The theme is awards don't matter. People that absolutely positively never got an Oscar nomination, but they have left us with so much incredible and memorable work that still holds up today. So, in other words, the awards can suck it, and these people are still awesome. So, with that, we're going to go ahead and dive in. Mary, you're up first, and you're bringing in a star that we haven't even talked about yet on Hollywood Kitchen. So let's talk.
No, we haven't. And as with the stars that I tend to bring to these, we probably could do an entire deep dive episode because the star was a foodie, had cooked, loved cooking, had so much about his life, and that is the amazing Danny Kaye. So if there's anybody out there watching who doesn't know who Danny Kaye is, he was Hans Anderson, Jester, White Christmas, the guy who wasn't Bing Crosby, that guy. And he was absolutely beloved, but he was more than that. He was multi-talented. So he could sing, he could dance, he was hilarious, he could be dramatic, but he also was a really good cook and took pride in that. And so, as he would have said, eat before it gets cold. So we're going to start by eating, and then I'll talk about the recipe. So this is Danny Kaye's sweet and sour sauce. And because I am not a gourmet level cook like he was, we're going to pair the sweet and sour sauce with some egg rolls from Trader Joe's.
As one does. As one does, guys.
So Carrie, one for you, one for me.
All right.
And we can dip in this fabulous
still nice and warm.
sauce. Okay.
To Danny Kaye.
Danny Kaye. Cheers.
I don't think any Oscar party is complete without Trader Joe's appetizers, so this is perfect.
No truer words you've ever spoken.
Carrie, Danny Kaye has really never been done on Hollywood Kitchen before.
Not yet.
He's amazing.
We're going to come back to it.
I'm so glad that you're doing him now.
Yeah, we're going to come back to it for sure. Okay, I'm going to let Carrie eat, and I'm going to come back and eat later. So I have to talk about Danny Kaye. So first of all, this recipe, it really was his recipe. It wasn't just one of the recipes that was attributed to him. I do think that there was a little bit of a typo in it because he didn't actually write down, hold up, close up. Close up wants some too. I'm going to put this back in this close-up proof box. All right. Hey, we'll get your moment in the sun later, okay?
Life with cats.
Okay, so Danny Kaye. So this recipe, I think it was his recipe, but I don't think he wrote it down. And I think that whoever made a typo because the original recipe calls for using white vinegar. And I made it that way at first. And I tried it and I was like, wow, that is very sour. That is very, very sour. And so I tried again with white wine vinegar, which made a huge difference. So if you're making the recipe, we'll be sure to put the right version, the adjusted version online. But it is really good and incredibly simple. And I think everybody should make it for their cocktail parties or whatever parties they're doing. So let's talk about Danny Kaye, because I could talk about him forever.
Oh gosh, yes.
So Danny Kaye was born in Brooklyn. And he was the first person in his family who was born in the United States. His family came from Ukraine.
He was Daniel Kaminsky, right?
Kaminsky, right? They came from Ukraine. They were Jewish refugees. And he actually didn't speak English until he started school, although he always claimed that he didn't speak any other languages other than English. But he, in fact, grew up speaking Yiddish in the home.
Oh.
And I think that that's a really important fact about him, which is that he tended to fudge the truth a little bit about a lot of things in his biography.
Close up is shocked as well.
Yes, see, close up can't even handle it. He's just out of here. It's like, I can't. But because of that, there's a lot of things when you read biographies about Danny Kaye, none of them really can agree on what happened. And none of them really agree on the motivations for things or why. But I think that what we can say is he was an incredibly talented and incredibly complicated person. And I think that he was super, super smart. I also, though, think he worked incredibly hard behind the scenes. And then he would come out and make things look really easy. And that's a really good lesson. He was, he had the gentle, lovable humor. I think we've all seen that with all of his films. You just fall in love with him, no matter what he's doing. And he could be really zany and crazy and all over the place, but you never ever punch down. Every joke was kind of at his own expense, or it was trying to get everybody to laugh along with him at something. I actually just rewatched The Secret Life of Walter Mitty last night, which is delightful. If you haven't seen that one, it's not seen as much these days, but it's where he plays this very sweet daydreamer who works for he's a writer of these pulp books where it's detective stories and heroes and whatever, and he falls into the dreams of envisioning himself as those characters, and then ends up falling into in real life situation, and it's just so charming, and it doesn't make sense. Every now and then he stops and sings a song that doesn't really go with anything, but you don't mind because they're just so fun. And while we're on the subject of his songs, we should pause and we should talk about his wife, okay. Sylvia Fine Kaye, or Sylvia Fine, as she was just professionally known. Because I would not be here being a theater film historian doing what I do without her influence. So she hosted a series of specials for PBS back in the 80s. I'm dating myself, but it was back in the 80s. And each one traced the history of American musical theater. And she was the commentator and the professor, but in a very entertaining way. And I watched those over and over and over and over and over again. And it's very difficult for me, even to this day, when I'm doing a lecture, to not fall into just doing a bad Sylvia Fine impression. But she also wrote most of Danny Kaye's material, not all of it, because obviously Hans Christian Andersen was Frank Loesser, wrote those wonderful songs, and White Christmas was Irving Berlin, who wrote those wonderful songs. But she wrote a lot of his material because she knew how to write for him, and she also knew how to get him to do the things that he would go into a neurotic twist about and get all jammed up, which is something that I, as a performer, understand deeply. That is the power of having the person who can tell you, calm down, you'll be fine, go out there, do your thing. I think we all need that.
This is true.
You're that for me.
Yeah, I tried.
So Danny Kaye, everybody's very quiet though. So
Mary, do you remember, I'm probably the only one here old enough to have watched First Run, although I was very young, his amazing variety show. Did you ever see? Oh, no. It was so great. And he had regulars, Harvey Korman, Joyce Van Patten. So it was pre-Carol Burnett. But it was wonderful, and he got to really go to town every week with amazing sketches. It was like the Secret Life of Walter Mitty every week. You should. I hope some of those are available
His
online.
TV show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have seen some of that, and that's really wonderful. The things he did. So my favorite Danny Kaye story was back when he was just popping in theater. He came from theater before he came to Hollywood. Hollywood didn't actually really know what to do with him for a little bit and it took him a while to figure it out. And then when they did, it clicked. But his first big break in theater was performing in Lady in the Dark, which was a musical written by Moss Hart, Kaufman and Hart fame on his own, wrote and directed it, with music by Kurt Weill and lyrics by Ira Gershwin. And I think the three of them just had a great time being incredibly silly. And it's this, if you've only seen the movie version of Lady in the Dark, then I am so sorry to tell you this, but you have not seen Lady in the Dark. There was a lot about that Broadway version that was wonderful and was never going to get past the censors. And I think in many ways it was a little bit ahead of its time. Danny Kaye played a supporting character through most of it. Didn't have very much to do through most of the play. And then when it gets to the third dream, which is this wild, surrealist circus dream, she's on trial in a circus. It just goes from thing to thing to thing. And then there's this tune that plays that's a Tchaikovsky tune, and he said, he's the ringmaster. He says, that's a wonderful tune. I wonder who wrote it. And the clowns shout, Tchaikovsky. And he says, Tchaikovsky, I love Russian composers. And then he goes into this super fast patter song that is just a list of the names of Russian composers. And it stopped, and he did it over his career as fast as 30 seconds. And somewhere between 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how fast or slow he decided to do it that day. And it stopped the show. It stopped the show cold. It was one of those like great Broadway, a star is born moments. And oftentimes when that sort of thing happens, the star has the reaction of either that song goes or I go, because they don't really want to share the spotlight. And I think it speaks really highly of the star of that show, Gertrude Lawrence, that she didn't do that. And instead, she just nodded, let the audience applaud him, and then immediately went out and did her own song that came right after that was also a showstopper called The Saga of Jenny. And never didn't ask for him to leave the show, didn't ask for that song to be reassigned to her. She just went for it. And they proceeded to have this sort of trying to top each other for the rest of the run until somebody finally told them to knock it off because it was distracting. And that's, I think, the joy of Danny Kaye is that, he could build these relationships with people off the stage that then spilled over onto the stage. And all of his humanitarian work, which he did win the humanitarian Oscar, I think also is a similar thing, that he wanted to connect with people. And when he went around doing his humanitarian work, he made sure that he was highlighting the humanity of the people, not just the suffering, which I think makes people want to do more.
And this does warrant an entire episode. He's on my list. My list is admittedly 1,000 miles long, but he is on that list.
So why don't we let somebody else talk, and we'll come back to Danny Kaye another time when we can do a proper deep dive, because I'm just jabbering here and throwing things around because it's such a short amount of time.
Oh yeah, but he does warrant that, and we will do that.
Yeah,
sure.
And speaking of that, of his humanitarian work, Mary, I just wanted to say I had a neighbor when I was little in Chicago who was going through a difficult childhood, and she wrote him a letter, and he wrote back. I read it myself. It was amazing, like a 3-page handwritten letter to this little girl in Chicago that she treasured for the rest of her life. That just shows the kind of guy he was, that he saw this, little girl who was having a hard time and just wrote this inspiring letter. That always touched me so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why we all love him, is that there's that there was a gentleness to him that comes through. Like even just you see that, go see like the old Muppet Show episode that he did. Do you remember that? Like, and he's just the way that he even just he interacted with the Muppets, like they were real people, and there was such connection and such joy there, and such beauty.
Gary Songer, who is a huge Hollywood Kitchen fan and such a kind person, he just commented, Danny Kaye show ran on CBS for 4 seasons, 1963 to 1967.
Yeah, and he actually walked away from it. They wanted to keep it going, but he believed in leaving them wanting more. And so he walked away from a few things when he could have kept going with them because it was just time to do something different creatively.
And speaking of humanitarian, we make the jump, Danny, to you because you had done Bob Hope's lemon meringue pie. And I've always remembered Bob Hope for the USO shows. My dad was in Vietnam in combat, and my dad got to see a show over there in Vietnam with Kel Welch and all these people. And my dad's like, I will never forget that. Because you're young, you're in a war, you're in this horrible situation. The idea that these people care enough to come to where you are and entertain you, that really hits me because Bob Hope was just all over that.
In several wars for many decades. And he's a bit of an outlier here in this particular show because although he did never receive a nomination, an acting nomination, he did get 5 honorary Oscars, including one Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award, much deserved. And I've seen his lemon pie recipe. Well, I got it from my celebrity cookbook from 1967, but it's also in USO cookbooks. And, who knows if Bob Hope ever made this pie, but maybe he did. It's a simple recipe. I used our lemons from our backyard. I've never made a lemon meringue pie before, but obviously I had to make an advance. Here it is. I'm gonna
Beautiful.
open. It was much higher last night, but it has to get cold again, and then the meringue kind of went down. But and I made my own crust, which he doesn't supply that recipe. So but Bob Hope, I'm sure all you know, but people don't remember that was born in London. He was English. He never had a trace of any accent. I forgot. Who knows how old he was when he moved here?
He was pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
and
lived to be 100 years old. He died in 2003. I have the LA Times from the day he died. I have a Life magazine. I have Bob Hope books. We like Bob Hope around here. We didn't always agree with his politics, although today we might. Anyway, I'm going to try. The first piece is always the hardest. I have my 1939 World's Fair pie server.
Danny, we need to do a huge LA episode at your house because your house is like an architectural masterpiece and a film history library. So
we do have lots of stuff. Ooh, it doesn't look bad. You
Ooh.
want to
Very nice.
You want to make sure that when you spread the meringue, before you put it in the oven, it goes all the way to the crust so it doesn't separate. And I used pie weights. I really went to town to make sure that the crust didn't sink, but I will just taste it. It looks like a lemon meringue pie. I've never made one before.
Oh my God, that's amazing. It looks perfect.
Right over, Dan.
Delicious. Thank you, Bob Hope. And, so another, reason he's a bit of an outlier here is even though he never won a competitive Oscar, for many people, when you think of the Oscars, you think of Bob Hope. He hosted 19 times, more than anyone else. Just to give you perspective, the next most times hosting was Billy Crystal with 9, and then Johnny Carson with 5. So, and again, we've already established how old I am, that I remember very young watching the Danny Kaye show, but he did it till 1968. I vividly remember, I just thought, it reminds me of my mother who grew up in the 40s and thought that the president of the United States was just always Franklin Roosevelt. I just thought the permanent host of the Oscar would always be Bob Hope. And he was great. I just want to say my favorite joke, because every time I see a clip of it, I laugh. One year he said, "Welcome to the Academy Awards," or as it's called in my house, Passover. Thought that was very funny.
And for this episode, the artwork I chose was Bob Hope trying to grab Marlon Brando's Best Actor Oscar
Oh,
award,
that's a great one.
fighting over. I just felt that was the perfect image for this episode.
I also have my silver frame I always use. It's actually from my wedding to Kendall, but I always put whoever I'm honoring there. There he is with
Yes.
one of his later episodes, I believe. He did it 15 times by himself, starting in 1940 all the way to 1968, and then 4 times when they had those usually not great attempts to have a bunch of multiple hosts. But I guess just quickly, I mean, unlike some people that we know and get furious about, I think was a very good actor. I love Bob Hope in movies. I'm not going to start, rending garments because he didn't get an acting nomination. I don't think he would say that he had the range of, Meryl Streep, obviously, but I thought he was great in the road movies. I thought he was great with Jane Russell in Paleface and Son of Paleface, Seven Little Foys. And what else? Fancy Pants, my favorite spy. But he's the kind of person that I wish he'd like. I think he really, because he had that, he was so funny, but scratch the surface of many people that are that funny, and there's great ability for drama. And although he did make some really good movies, I wish he'd been given a chance to make, like something really gritty. Now, maybe he wouldn't have wanted to, but I do think he was a good actor, but I'm not going to be sorry he didn't get those nominations. And he has 5 damn Oscars, so he really, and he ran himself.
Part of the point with the episode was not just to focus on, oh, they didn't get an Oscar, but to focus on, while that is true, they left behind such a memorable, enjoyable body of work. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Totally. But then, I'm sure many of you've seen Oscars, if not ever watching them, and I mean, he was just so funny because his humor was dry. He would roast the people there, maybe not as intensely as we saw later, and maybe we'll see tonight with Conan, who I like, but they ain't no Bob Hope. And I think most of the later hosts, including even Johnny Carson, would say, yeah, I'm not Bob Hope. He was the perfect host, in my opinion.
You know what just occurred to me, Danny? Sometimes when I sit in traffic in LA, I play little games. I try to imagine what like contemporary stars would have done in old Hollywood movies or vice. I just kind of try to entertain myself. And it just hit me, you were saying how Bob Hope but behind funny people, there's often a well of pain or drama. Think of what if Bob Hope had played the John Candy role in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because he's so funny throughout that movie until the end when you're like, oh my God, your heart breaks for him. Yeah. And I was, oh my God, what if they could have cut out the cursing or any censorable thing, and made that film with Bob Hope in that John Candy part. I mean, that's, he kind of deserved a role like that where he could be funny and then he could just break your heart, because he definitely had that.
He did. And, again, I don't know that he necessarily was longing for it as some people do. And he might have been very happy, but we've always admired Bob Hope in this house. As you can tell, I have a lot more memorabilia and clips of his. So there we go. Mr. Oscars himself, Mr. Academy Awards. I bet there's not ever a host or that doesn't, have a moment where they pray to Bob Hope before they walk out there if they know what's good for him.
Exactly. It's something, Danny, when you were talking about, that the Oscars don't often award comedy. It did occur to me that it's like, even though I'm not a huge fan of the Golden Globes, I think we all are aware of the problems in that organization. The thing that they do that I really do appreciate is that they recognize the drama and comedy in musicals are different skill sets, and that they are both equal of being awarded. And I would love to see the Oscars come up with some way to award people who are wonderful and consistently good in comedy.
I wonder if they ever considered breaking that apart. Of course, you could get into a spirited discussion about some of the things that the Golden Globes consider as comedies. I used to joke I mean, some of them are insane. Like, that is not a comedy. I mean, every single year with the TV stuff. But that's a good point. It would have been interesting if the Golden Globes is comedy musicals, and then And it's true. There are some, best actor and actress that won for comedies and musicals, but few.
You. So Liz, tell us about the cocktails you are working on for us today.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We were just talking about actors who kind of flex their range a bit. Because I have Fred MacMurray, who was sadly never nominated.
Great.
One of my
Love-
favorites. Sorry.
Said I just love Fred MacMurray.
Oh, yeah.
How the hell could he not get one for Double Indemnity if nothing else? Jesus.
Oh, I know. And it's amazing to me just like kind of going because I first was introduced to him, I'm sorry to say, through the Shaggy Dog and his
That's
Disney
fine.
movie.
That's
Okay.
fine. Happiest millionaire.
And my three sons, I mean, he's just such a brilliant comedian. And then I've recently discovered his romantic comedies. Like yesterday, I just watched one with him and Claudette Colbert, The Egg and I. It was super fun. And I've seen some more like rom-coms from that era with him, and he's great. And so it's wild to me when you think like Billy Wilder was like, that's the guy for Double Indemnity, because I don't think he'd had those kind of roles before then. So of course I love him in Double Indemnity, but the role that I feel like, man, if I could have given him an Oscar for anything, it would be Mr. Sheldrake in The Apartment. I absolutely love his performance in that. It definitely should have gotten a supporting actor nom, because he's just like, you look at him, and if you're familiar with his comedic roles, you think, oh, Jack Lemmon's finally meeting a nice guy in the office who's going to give him a break. And then you see him at that tiki bar with Shirley MacLaine, and it's like the mask comes off, and it's like, oh, this is really not a good guy. He's really the villain of this story. And I just think that he plays those two sides so well. So the drink that I wanted to make today to kind of celebrate that performance in that movie is called a Derby Daiquiri. And I found it, I've kind of gone down the tiki rabbit hole this year. I absolutely love the tiki culture. And also it's been fascinating to see the parallel timelines of that movement with classic Hollywood. Like the two are so intertwined. The original tiki bars in Los Angeles, frequented by these classic film stars, often decorated by Hollywood art directors, selling this fantasy world. So the one that I found, I thought it was really interesting in The Apartment how they go to a tiki bar in the movie, and it's in New York City. So I was looking in here, and they said that there was a drink called the Derby Daiquiri that was part of a rum contest in 1959. And the winning drink was published in magazines all across the country. And then tiki bars around the country started serving it. So the fact that The Apartment was came out in 1960, it totally tracks that this might have been a drink served at the rickshaw in The Apartment. And Shirley MacLaine does order a daiquiri in the movie. So, or actually Fred MacMurray orders it for her. So I thought I would make that today. I normally shake my cocktails and strain them in the cocktail shaker, but a lot of the classic tiki stuff from the Don the Beachcomber's recipes do call for flash blending, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to do that real quick right here. I've kind of already mixed it up. All right, that's it. And then, see, and then you just strain it into the glass here.
Liz, the next time we're in Los Angeles, we'll take you to Damon's, we'll take you to the Tonga Hut, we'll take you to some really good
I want to go to the Tiki Tea because that is one of, okay. That's like one of the original, like it's been around for a long time, and there you can trace the line of bartenders from there to, 1930s Don the Beachcomber. So I feel like that's the place where I might have a chance of getting one of those original recipes in the way that it was made. But yeah, I love it. And in fact, I'm skipping the TCM Fest this year to go to a tiki festival that is the same weekend, the Arizona Tiki Oasis in Scottsdale. So I'm pretty excited.
Is that where you live, Elizabeth? Where are you based?
I live in Austin.
In Austin. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and TCM Fest was a little bit later this year, and it falls on my wedding anniversary, and my husband and I are both really into the tiki thing. So we're like, well, it's maybe a better way to celebrate.
That'll be
So
fun.
anyway, cheers to Fred MacMurray, the biggest sleaze in the apartment, but man, he does a great job. And yeah, I just think he's such a terrific actor, but like really understated. I don't think that everybody when you mention Frederick Murray, people are like, "Oh, I love him," but he's not somebody that was super flashy with their success or their stardom. I think he invested in a lot of real estate and just kind of made his money that way too, and he wasn't super into the whole like Hollywood glamour thing. So I think he's a really fun actor to watch, and I think it's interesting that Billy Wilder saw something in him to put him in these more dramatic roles because he was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I made that drink, and then I love when cocktails are named after stars. It makes my job easier when I'm trying to figure out what to drink with the movie. So this one was called the Mae West, and Carrie, I know we'll circle back to it with your talk on her, but this was an interesting one for me because it takes a raw egg yolk, and I have not used that in a cocktail up till now. So I'm really hoping I don't get bird flu from this, but it's egg yolk, powdered sugar, and brandy. And then you sprinkle a little bit of cayenne pepper on the top because she's kind of a spicy lady. And it's actually not that bad. I think it'd make a great brunch drink. So cheers to Mae West. It's an interesting cocktail for sure. And if you're looking for something that's a little unusual, that could have maybe only happened in the 1930s, this is your drink.
So quick sidebar. It's so funny that you brought up with Fred MacMurray because I just remembered is that he also was part of a Kurt Weill, Ira Gershwin bizarre performance thing. And I can't remember the name of the film, but it is on YouTube, this clip. So if you put in Fred MacMurray Christopher Columbus,
okay,
you will find it. The film, which the title is escaping me, he plays a time traveler. And but like a bumbling time traveler who sort of falls into different time periods. And so he ends up on Christopher Columbus's ship just at the time of a mutiny. And that turns into like a 10-15 minute bizarre operetta.
Well, he started out as a musician in Hollywood. Like he started out as a saxophone player and was in bands that were in movies, and that's kind of how he got his break into Hollywood. So that's really interesting that he continued.
Weirdest thing. And it's really just darling at the same time. Like everybody should go watch it.
I say that if I had to pick the greatest 60 seconds of well-written and perfectly performed dialogue, it would be the Fred MacMurray Barbara Stanwyck speeding ticket. Scene. Yes. I mean, everyone should just like leave here and just watch that on YouTube. It is utter.
How going, officer? I'd say around 90.
After Laura's done talking. Don't go.
Okay, you and I are going to work on that, Laura. We have to perform it. We'll do it at the festival.
Yeah, right.
So, Laura, we're going to talk about Myrna Loy. We have done an episode on her before, and then the previous one we made her rhubarb fanchonettes, which, by the way,
I saw that.
We took them to the Hollywood Bowl. But you can never have enough Myrna, ever.
Oh, never.
I believe that. And tell us about the non-cheese puff of Myrna Loy.
Yes. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about the history of this thing before I get into the non-cheese puff cheese puff. I found this recipe via somebody who had actually been served this by Myrna Loy. He had gone to Myrna Loy's house to interview her about Tennessee Williams. He was working on some project about Tennessee Williams, and Myrna Loy knew him because they were both board members of, I think, the American Place Theater. And so he went to her house to talk to her, and she served him these, what he called cheese puffs. And so I know that this was actually Myrna's recipe. Um, but it's not a cheese puff. It's more like what when I made it and I tasted it, it tasted almost like an egg Benedict. Like it had you know, it includes mayonnaise, and it warmed to be almost like a hollandaise sauce. And it has cheese and green onions. It's delicious. It's delicious. It's just not a cheese puff. And you put it on a piece of bread. The recipe calls for brown bread, um, like I think one of the things that they give you is rye or something. But I don't really like those kinds of breads, so I used a ciabatta. And it was really good. It was awesome. But when I read the recipe, I was like, am I missing something? Like, why did they call this a cheese puff? It puffs up in the oven, so I kind of get it. You know, it when you take it out of the oven, the mixture on top of the bread rises. So yeah, but a cheese puff is its own thing. So clearly, this recipe needs its own name. But yeah, one of the things that the guy said who had these served to him by Myrna Loy, he said that these little things were a sort of staple of high society appetizers in New York City of a certain era. So it's very cool. Let me show you actually a picture of it because I made them on Friday, and had them for dinner on Friday night, and they were quite good. But let me just show you. Am I able to share the screen? I think I am. Oh, it says no, it says sharing is not turned on.
Hang on, let me figure out how to turn that on.
Okay.
Is it almost a little Welsh rarebitty,
That's what
Laura?
I was thinking. It
Yeah,
sounded
it is
like.
kinda. It is kinda. So the ingredients are mayonnaise, cheddar cheese, shredded cheddar cheese, um, green onion, and salt and pepper. So you know, it's definitely a cheesy thing.
I just made you a co-host, so I don't know if
Oh,
that's
thank you. Okay, yeah, I think I can do it. Yeah, if I were to make these again, I'd probably put it over more of the bread. I had no idea how this was going to turn out. Um, but yeah, I'd probably you know, expand it more over the bread. But I think it's one of those things where you I mean, it's one of those things where you need really high quality ingredients. Like I could see that if you were to get pre-shredded cheese and use it, it might not taste as good. I used the Kerrygold aged cheddar, and it was really good. Um, but but yeah, I think because of this dish's high society roots, it needs some high quality ingredients to taste good.
Did that
Um,
guy then have a whole meal at Myrna's hand or just the appetizers
it
and
sounds like he just had the appetizers.
ah,
find that
Yeah.
story.
What was that?
Where'd you find the story about the cheese puff?
It was a blog post by a guy called the Intrepid NYC Foodie, who I guess had a previous life as a historian of some kind, and met Myrna to talk about Tennessee Williams. And he said he called her and she answered the phone and said, "Well, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna be able to tell you, but come on over and we'll have some food and we'll chat." So they talked about Tennessee Williams, I guess, for a couple of hours and ate these little puffy things.
what we all dream of hearing from Myrna Loy. I don't know what I'll have to say, but come over.
Yes. And can you imagine that voice, you know, the voice that we all love so much on the phone so many decades later? This was in the 80s, he said.
Oh, I
Lucky.
want to eat
Yeah.
cheese puffs with Myrna Loy. I want that
Yes.
experience.
Yes, I would definitely do that. Um, yeah, I mean, do we want to talk a little bit about Myrna? Like,
We can talk about it for a few minutes, and then I'll get into my final Mae West presentation.
yeah, well, Myrna, it's a shocker to many people who know about Myrna Loy, but don't, you know, maybe know the history of the Oscars that she never was even nominated for one. And
Ridiculous.
it is ridiculous. And one of the things that I was reading is that people think that maybe it was her politics that were the heads of the studios were kind of out to get her. That they didn't want somebody of her political she didn't shy away from politics, very, very liberal, and an outspoken pro-Roosevelt and all of that. And the studios maybe didn't want to call attention to that. And she ultimately she was called out in the Hollywood Reporter for being a communist. She sued them. And then there was talk that HUAC wanted to call her, and she wrote to them and said, "I dare you to call me to testify," and they didn't. So anyway, she did not pull any punches. There's some talk that maybe the studios kept her from an Oscar, but she got an honorary one in 1991.
Another part of this too is she made everything look easy. I think Cary Grant kind of had that same situation where they make it look so effortless that you just kind of take them for granted. I think that could play into it. I'm just speculating, but
yeah. And the other thing, the fact that she didn't get any recognition for the best years of our lives. I mean, that beautiful bedroom scene when she's bringing her husband breakfast in bed and she's sort of averting her eyes. It's almost this awkward encounter between them. That is so beautiful. That one scene. And she should have won an Oscar just for that scene alone.
Agreed.
Totally. Did she perform Tennessee Williams on the stage, Laura?
I'm trying. I think she did, and I'm trying to remember what play it was. I can find out.
I am embarrassed to say that I don't know. I'm a theater person. I should know that.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, these cheese puffs, if we want to call them that, are recommended. I would say grate the cheese yourself. And maybe use a little bit less mayonnaise than the recipe calls for, because I found it a little bit wet. I think if it's more cheesy and less mayonnaisey, it might elevate the recipe a bit.
I'm surprised that it did puff in the oven. I didn't think those ingredients would. Like a lot?
I was surprised too, but it I mean, not a lot. It's not like a souffle or anything, but it rose from the bread for sure.
So you put it on the bread and then you put it in, right?
Yeah, you put it on the bread and put the bread on a baking sheet and then broil it on in the oven for the recipe said 4 minutes or so, but I kept an eye on it. For me, it took like closer to 10. And even when I took it out, the bread wasn't that toasted. So
I wonder if it would fluff up more if the bread was smaller, if it was like little canapé.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that is possible. It's definitely something to try again, something to perfect.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And lastly, for my recipe contribution today, I decided to do Mae West fruit compote. And I love Mae West. She is the gift that will never, ever stop giving. And not only was she a great actress, but she was a great writer. I really think she deserved maybe a screenplay nomination because those double entendres, those one-liners, that snappy dialogue, and she wrote that. She handpicked Cary Grant to be her co-star, which definitely helped put him on the map. She was such an intelligent, savvy woman. And I've always read, though, she was really into healthy eating too. Like she didn't drink. I don't think she smoked. She was really a pretty healthy person. And I'd never tried a Mae West recipe, which I've got to correct that. And she does deserve a standalone episode as well on my list. But the fruit compote basically consists of, you have diced bananas, chopped bananas, which we have here. You have a chopped pear and a chopped apple. Now, my mom got me a KitchenAid mini chop at Christmas, Oh my gosh, that thing is amazing. And you can just put an apple in there, hit the button, and it's like just so finely chopped. So I'm gonna put the chopped pear, and it saves you so much time in the kitchen. The chopped pear, the chopped apple. I'm gonna stir all of this up. And then I'm trying to find the recipe on my phone because my printer is currently down. But okay, it says combine fruit, top with almonds, which we've got some almonds here. We will top with. And then it says you can also add raisins. So I've got a little bit of raisins. They stick in the box there. Hang on. Okay. Bit of raisins. And you can also, if desired, make a syrup, which is basically powdered almonds, milk, and honey. I'm going to try this. My mini chop, if you leave something in there long enough when it's going, it will turn it into dust. Like this is a bowl of almond dust, basically, right here. So we'll see how this turns out, but I'm going to add a little bit of honey, a little bit of milk to the almond dust, as I'm calling it, and kind of see how that works out.
Did it specify how much ratio of honey?
There was no specification at all because vintage recipes. So
Make a slurry.
make a slurry is kind of the theme I'm going with here. See how this shakes out. But there's a really good documentary that came out. I think it was American Masters a few years ago on Mae West. It's really, really good. If you can find it online, it's worth watching. And she really was, I think, one of the great stars of the pre-Coat era. And I just have so much fun watching her movies. You know, they're just so entertaining, even today. I mean, they don't feel that dated. She's liberated, she's independent, she makes her wants and needs very clear. I mean, she's just such a heroine that you can even watch right now and just still love and still root for her.
Yeah, the Austin Film Society did a series last year. It was called Fast Women of the Pre-Code, and it was a lot of fun. But they showed I'm No Angel, and oh my God, her chemistry with Cary Grant in that, off the charts.
I've always heard that she spotted him outside a window at Paramount when he was walking by. And she said, "Who's that?" That's a contract player named Cary Grant. And she said, can he talk? Yeah. And she said, he's hired. The woman knew a good thing when she saw one.
Yeah.
Totally.
And boy, could he ever talk.
Oh, yeah. Here's my slurry. Okay, here's the slurry. And I'm going to pour the slurry on the compote.
Interesting. It's not your typical fruit compote.
No.
It doesn't look really pretty. It kind of needs...
Well, yeah, you know, if you add, I think some of that is because the fruit browns we were talking. So if you add a little bit of lemon juice on top of all of that, that'll keep it from browning.
Just my humble opinion, but I feel like this needs color, like some strawberries, some raspberries, maybe some grapes, some kind of color to it. Because right now it looks kind of yellow and lumpy, which maybe not the prettiest of things.
I also thought compote meant cooked, no? As opposed to fruit salad.
Usually is. But as Carrie said, I'm here to attest. I'm looking over her shoulder. Doesn't say anything about cooking.
Like we've often talked about in these restaurants, I think they just assume that you can fill in blanks on your own. Like there's so many of these that'll be like, put in warm oven. On until certain, and you're like, but how long? Like there's a lot missing.
Yeah.
It does not get easier with cocktails either. It's like one wine glass of gin. And I'm like, is a wine glass now or a wine glass then? What is the size that we're talking about?
And, you know, I wonder too, you know, this was an era where women learned to be, you know, and like from their parents or from, you know, home ec classes or something like that. And they probably you know what this means, and that wisdom has been lost because we don't need it now. We have temperature measures on ovens now and things.
Yeah, I think strawberries, raspberries, and grapes. This does taste good. I took a taste of it. It's not bad. It's just I think it needs lemon juice and it needs colorful fruit on top. That is my 2 cents for whatever that is worth.
Where I think Danny's right. It might be worth also trying to cook it cook it a little bit.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that might change it a little bit. And then
Sure.
maybe put it on some toast or something, which is
Yeah.
what I would often do.
Or get a little like one of those little shells you can buy at the store and just
Yeah.
pour it in the shell and
Yeah. I think it's definitely worth experimenting, but it's more.
Yeah. And I do want to do a whole episode on Mae West. Danny and I, several of us know Kimberly Beal Schmidt, who lives in Mae West old apartment at the Ravenswood. I have gotten to visit that, which was amazing. And I know of a collector in Palm Springs who collects on Mae West. So I've got resources. It's just a matter of coordinating them and getting it to happen. It's just,
Oh, to do it from her apartment, Carrie, you've got to do it.
I know if she's very busy, so I'll see what I can do. But at least I have some ideas. It's just a matter of time and getting it all together. But well, does anybody have any final thoughts on your star, on the Oscars, or anything else?
It's made me really I'm going to miss Bob Hope tonight, but I have high hopes for Conan. I hope he does a good job. It's a hard gig.
I was gonna say I'm team Conan. It's like, God, how old am I that I still say that? But I like Conan. I like Conan a lot. And I think it's gonna be different having him do it because he's connected. Like he hosted the Late Show for so long, but he still never felt like he was of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
In Hollywood, but not of Hollywood.
It'll be interesting to see
how
he does.
Having that light removal might be nice.
Our closest connection to classic Hollywood would be if Isabella Rossellini won, and I don't think she will, but I would not object. I love that movie. I loved her performance. I love her.
Me too.
Wouldn't that be great? Oh,
she's looking more and more like her mother with each passing day.
Really is.
Oh, and her performance in that film is just so good.
Yes.
Stunning.
So subtle.
Yeah.
I want Flo to win, and not just because the cat in the lead looks up, but I mean, that doesn't hurt. But I saw it literally when it was at one theater in LA. Like I heard about it early on and thought I have to see this film. And it's so beautiful. And as a silent film lover, sitting through a film where there's zero dialogue, it didn't bother me whatsoever. I've got a few friends that have been very hesitant to see it, but I'm like, it's gorgeous. You just have
I saw it. It's stunning, and I think it's going to win. There's my prediction for tonight.
Go nuts because no offense to Disney or Universal or whatever, but those studios have so much power, so much marketing muscle, so many resources. Flow is this tiny, low budget animated film that came out of Latvia and with no dialogue and a cat. So it's like, I don't know, it would be the ultimate like kind of underdog, upset if Flow could win. And I really liked Timothy Chalamet in the Bob Dylan movie. My brother is obsessed with Bob Dylan, so the whole family had to go see it Christmas Day. And my brother was like thrilled. And I loved it too. I thought he did a phenomenal job. But I also love Adrian Brody. So if either one of them win, it'll be great.
I was just happy there were two films with like set in a different time period this year.
Yeah.
Those are always my favorites. So I'm like, okay, I don't even care what they're about. I'll go see them.
We're big Wicked fans in my house, but musicals have a very small chance. Although there've been several that won Best Picture.
I think that Wicked's going to win for costumes.
As it should.
Yeah.
All
I said that from the first time that I saw it in the theater. I said this is going to win an Oscar for the costumes.
Mm-hmm. And maybe set design. I mean, it should. I don't even know what.
Yeah. I have one last thing to say about Myrna before we go. Can I say, Carrie?
Yes.
If you haven't read her memoir, Being and Becoming, you should. It's fabulous. She wrote it with a co-writer, and it's clear that the co-writer is trying to steer her away from the politics and steer her back into her career. Like she clearly just wanted to talk about how she wanted to impeach everybody. Like we need to impeach Nixon, impeach Reagan, it's so funny. Like you can see the moment when her co-writer tried to steer her back. But she's witty, she's articulate. Find that book if you can. It's not terribly easy to find, but if you can, you should.
It'd be funny if someone did a performance art piece and read the Myrna Loy book and kind of acted it out.
Ooh, one woman show, Myrna Loy.
Yes.
Like Loy live.
What I do is
I'd be there.
I'll involve projections. They'll be no.
She's great in everything. One of my favorites is The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer with Cary
Yeah.
Grant, Shirley Temple. I love teenage Shirley Temple.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Although you could look at it and it's like, but it's the difference is Cary Grant doesn't really want to be with Shirley Temple. They're just doing that as a ruse, but it has some sensibility issues.
Yeah.
Maybe, Sen, if we could all say, because I know sometimes people watch and they don't really know the stars we're talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe one film of each of our stars that we all recommend everybody goes out and watches.
That's a great idea. So, Mary, you start. The Danny Kaye film that people must see if they've never seen Danny Kaye.
Hans Christian Andersen.
Okay. Danny?
I'm going to say Ghostbreakers with Paulette Goddard.
Liz?
I'm going to say The Apartment. It's my favorite. It's in my top 5 movies of all time. So for sure, my favorite, Fred MacMurray.
Laura?
I mean, it's not really fair with Myrna because The Thin Man is the obvious choice, right? I mean, but I think if you've seen The Thin Man, then the next two I think are also really solid choices. The next two Thin Mans.
For Mae West, I'm going to say I'm No Angel.
Hard agree.
Yes. Well, guys, thank you so much for doing our compact Oscar cook-along this year. I'm so grateful. Be sure to take a picture of your item that you've cooked, and if you can, have it next to a picture of the star. And thank you all to everybody watching. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you to everybody for participating. And stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history.
And thank you, Carrie, for hosting.
Thank you.
Like always, Carrie.
For food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen. See you soon.